Welcome back to the All-American Legacy Podcast. This is Joe Bacino. We recorded this week's episode in Sainte-Mère-Église, Normandy, France, in commemoration and in honor of D-Day. And this podcast is being released on the 73rd anniversary of D-Day. Sainte-Mère-Église is really the birthplace of the All-American Legacy. In terms of the recognition of the division across most of Europe, really most of the world, it starts here on D-Day in Sainte-Mère-Église. And obviously we were born in Georgia and then reformed in Louisiana. Now we're stationed in North Carolina, but we're known for Sainte-Mère-Église and D-Day. Sainte-Mère-Église translates into Holy Mother Church, and this place really is sanctuary for the 82nd Airborne Division. You see the AA patch everywhere in Sainte-Mère-Église, and they really honor our organization. We're in the airport now, heading back, but throughout the course of this episode, you're going to hear many voices of our D-Day Paratroopers. You're going to hear some of the voices of some of the citizens who remember D-Day, and we just wanted to honor that legacy. Thanks for listening.
This is the 82nd Airborne Division, fearless among fighting units.
From Fort Bragg, home of the airborne and the center of the military universe, this is the All-American Legacy Podcast. An inside look at the 100-year history of the 82nd.
They are All-American all the way.
This show is all about our All-American legends, and here is a real one. Joseph Mortini, D-Day paratrooper. He's from Erie, Pennsylvania. He served in the division for only 2 years, but those were very eventful years. 1943 to 1945. In addition to D-Day and Normandy, he was also in the Battle of the Bulge, and he's still very tied to the division. At 90 years old, he comes to All-American Week. He was just at All-American Week, All-American Week 100 a few weeks ago, and comes to Normandy, and we caught up with him and spoke with him about his D-Day experiences.
At that time, everybody was going in the Army, see. So I thought, man, I'd like to join too, I was going to join the Army when I was 17. I went home, had my father sign it, and he said, Joe, why don't you wait until they call you? I said, okay, I'll wait. Then when I turned 18, I was drafted in the Army. And then first thing I wanted to do was get in airborne. I never was in combat before, so I didn't know what to expect, And so that was my first experience of being in combat. It was Normandy. I remember when I flew from England to France, and I was approaching France, and all of a sudden my plane was rocking back and forth, and I thought it was the weather. Then when I jumped out, I realized it was anti-aircraft fire shooting at our plane, and then I jumped, and I thought all the trace was coming up, and I thought my life was over. And then I landed between two trees, and I was swinging back and forth, and then I jumped up and I landed on the ground. When I landed, I turned and I looked up and I seen a glider coming in, and they had a spotlight right on it, and I thought they were supposed to come in the next day. And I wondered why their glider was there. And they had a spotlight on it, and they started traces going right through it, and it crashed. Then I turned to my right, and I seen a C-47 coming down crashing. And I said to myself, hope the guys got out of there, It was kind of scary when you see all them traces coming up at you. And then I heard Maldonado from the tree. He was hollering for help. He couldn't get out of his harness. So I told him to release his reserve, and I grabbed a hold of it and pulled on it, and he come crashing down. I tried to catch him, but he fell on the ground and he sprained his ankle. So I had to leave him. So I went over, and this officer told me to move out. And this kid stepped in front of me, and the German shot him in the leg. And I dove into the ditch. And then I pulled his leg off, and I gave him there was a morphine they gave us for wounded, and I get his out of his kit, and I gave him a shot of that morphine on his leg, and so he wouldn't have so much pain. Then we picked him up. Some other fellow was with me, came and we picked him up and rapped on this Frenchman's door, and he wouldn't let it. He wouldn't said no, don't let him in. He'd want him in there. So we pushed him in, and he fell on the floor. We shut the door and left, and then the officer said we should wait till it gets daylight to know what we can do. And then we waited till daylight. Then we moved out when it got daylight, and we walked down the road, and we ran into my company commander, and he told us we're going to go down and knock them artillery pieces out. And then we started walking down the road towards it where the artillery was, and then we ran into my lieutenant colonel, battalion commander, and he said, let's go. And they had a huddle, and they were going to start attacking Hill 30 and then defend it. And then we started walking down towards to Hill 30, and then this kid jumped over a hedgerow and shot the kid right in the back of him. He had a safety off his gun, and when he grabbed the gun, he grabbed the trigger and he shot this kid right in the chest. And the kid fell over, and the doctor said he's going to live only a couple of hours. So we moved out, we went down to Hill 30, and we got to Hill 30, then Germans started attacking us. And when I was on the left side, on the side that wasn't the fighting was going on, and then we stayed there a couple of days, and then they had like all the guys that were, there was different from different regiments and different companies. There was 101st guys there, guys from the 505, 507, and all that. And so they stopped like the war, and then they have all the guys go back to their own regiment. Then after we got on Hill 30, and then we started moving up towards Bob T, to take Bob T. As we were going up there, we ran into these two scout cars, German scout cars, and we killed about 9 Germans, and then we went up and we took Bob T, and then we stayed there all day, and then they moved us back. Yeah, when I entered the Army, it's like you go with the guys, you go training. We took night jumps with practice before jumping in Normandy, and then they had bricks put in our musette bag, simulating landmines and stuff, the weight, so you'd be used to that. And you sleep with them, you eat supper, you eat with them, you go out with them, and it's like a big family. That's what it seemed like, you know. Especially when you're in combat and you know your buddies get killed, and you feel bad about that, you know. I feel sad for them, but, you know, they had to, especially there's some guys like Goodwin and Lamberson. They got wounded in Normandy, got wounded in Holland, and they get killed in the Battle of Bulge. We were near the end of the war, we were in the Roar River, and they both got killed the same day. They went through all them battles, and then they get killed at the end of when the war was over. So we had a lot of replacements. So I felt sorry for them placements because they didn't get that bond. You know, you meet the guys, you know, you sleep with them, you know, you go out with them. Those replacements didn't have that, you know, get to know everybody. So, and especially when some of those replacements, you didn't even, when they get killed, you don't know even who they are, you know, their name, because you only see them for a few days, you know.
The stories we provide you here are not our stories, these are their stories. The story of the All-American Paratrooper on D-Day. And coming here to Sainte-Mère-Église, we had the opportunity to meet so many of them. This next one is George Schenkel. He's 95 years old, a D-Day paratrooper, and he had some great memories and some great stories. So here is the story of George Schenkel.
The words of Dwight Eisenhower The eyes of the world are on you, still run up and down my spine when you realize that here, for the few of us were there, was our 15 minutes of fame, that the world was watching. And that makes you feel important. For the first time in my life, I felt important. I only had a total of 16 jumps in my life, and that was enough. Fortunately, I was never first nor last. Didn't have a choice. I didn't have a chance to refuse. I never, always first or last. There was always someone pushing you to get out the door, and all of a sudden you're out there, and in a few seconds you're on the ground. Fortunately, I never had any problems. I jumped every time I was requested, but I didn't volunteer for anything. The sky was like this, but it was a moonlit night. It was about 2 o'clock in the morning, and the clouds were very similar to this. The moon was out, and I remember about, 20 yards away, someone standing up, and I said, "Get down, you want to get shot." I can remember that clearly. And it happened to be a second lieutenant. He did get down anyway. But really, after that, we didn't know where we were or anything. So we were led to a group. There were about 200 of us around, sitting around. Colonel Shanley, who was the battalion commander, was rounding up enough so that we could become an army. But he led the group of us until we got enough on Hill 30, which was the command post between Lafayette and Chef Dupont. We had enormous confidence. Actually, we had leaders that gave us confidence. And until we saw Jim Gavin come through the bushes, we didn't know whether this thing was going to work or not. But when I saw Jim Gavin, we knew it was going to work. And this was this was D-Day. But when you see leaders like that instill confidence, really, I see it today. Leaders like that, young men that instill confidence. And hey, I don't know, I was 21 when I enlisted. This was 1944, so I was, 22, 23. We had our training, and anyway, most of us were kids off the streets, but it was a new experience, but really, we felt proud to be part of this thing. Airborne, here we are. This thing of pride and ego is difficult to get along with. I know we had an awful time with the tankers until combat, but it is the pride they instill in you in basic training. They take the civilian feeling out of you, and they turn you into the pride of being a soldier. And this pride and the confidence in your officers is something it's instilled, and you don't realize it until it happens, that this installation of officers, the pride in the officers, confidence in the officers, saves your life. You do as commanded and without question. I remember Sergeant Thomas, First Thomas, crossing it up, get down, and we all did as commanded, and it saved our lives. I feel proud of having served during that time period. I mean, getting along late in life, I feel proud to have survived this long. Oh yeah, this coming back to Normandy, you become revered. American soldiers are revered in Normandy. I mean, the people of Normandy. Coming back here, and I've tried to come back every year because it is my age-reducing medicine. I come back to Normandy, and although I'm 95 now, I feel like I'm 50 or a little younger. because it is my age-reducing medicine. No, but seriously, it has meant so much to me in my life that it brings me back every year. Every year I come back. I know now I have to have an escort. Now my daughter is my escort.
We caught up with Magali Malay. She is the director of the museum, the Airborne Museum here in the town square in Sainte-Mère-Église. It's an incredible tribute to the paratroopers of the 82nd and the 101st that jumped in here on D-Day. It's actually built right in the town square, right in the a house that was on fire on D-Day. I know if you listen to our D-Day, our two-part D-Day episode, Maurice Renaud talked about this house that was on fire and woke up a lot of people in the town, and that house is where the museum is now housed. It's right in the middle of the town square. It's facing the chapel, the famous chapel that Private John Steele jumped onto.
So it's located here because during D-Day, the 6th of June, here you have a house on a fire. And you also have paratroopers hanging in the trees all around us. So, and of course you have combat on the church square. So just after the war, the mayor of Sainte-Mère-Église, Alexandre Renaud, decided to create, to pay tribute to the US paratroopers, 82nd and 101st paratroopers, who liberate Sainte-Mère-Église, his town. So he really wanted to create this museum in order to pay tribute to them. And so he decided to find a glider. He really wanted to have a glider. So, but it took many years to find a glider. Yeah, and finally the US Army found a glider and gave it to the museum after renovating all the glider because it was quite broken. And so this museum, the cornerstone ceremony of this museum was in June '63, and General Gavin was there. And for the inauguration of the museum, so it was, of course, 6th of June '64, you have General Taylor, the commander of the 101st during World War II, General Ridgway, and also you have, of course, French authority, and you have also many veterans. And for instance, you have John Steele, so the paratrooper on Guide on the Steeple. So it was very important for the town of Sainte-Mère-Église to have a memorial for these paratroopers. For the French people, it's important because this story is important first, and we have many schools and students coming here to know the story, and because it's our story, of course. And also we have for foreign people, you know, when I'm saying, of course, it's important for the American people because many American soldiers died here for the Battle of Normandy and after for the liberation of Western Europe. So it's important to come on the battlefields. And it's the same thing for English people, and you know, also for Dutch people because they are invited to. So, and they have, for instance, Operation Market Garden. So we have a common story with Netherlands, Belgium, for instance. So during D-Day, this paratrooper was an 82nd Airborne. So he dropped onto, with his stick, he dropped onto the church square. So it was not what is scheduled, but he dropped here. So he was hanging on the steeple, and he was wounded during his drop to his feet. And in each steeple in Normandy, you have Germans, because they use it to see all around what happened. So you have 2 German soldiers in the steeple. And so they hanged, they take John Steele into the steeple. He was a prisoner for hours, but after, finally, he rejoined his unit, and after he went, so of course he did the Battle of Normandy and Market Garden and Battle of the Bulge and Varsity and so on. So he finished the war. And after, so when the commemoration here began, so the first, we have to know that the first commemoration here of D-Day was in 1945. The mayor of Sainte-Mère-Église asked General Gavin if it's possible to have some American soldiers. So we are just after, only 1 month after the end of the war, and he asked if it's possible to have American soldiers in order to commemorate the liberation of the town. And so it's here, each year from 1945 you have a commemoration. And one day, I think it's in the 70s, it was decided to put a mannequin here in order to remember what happened here. And so it stays here now. For Sainte-Mère-Église, 82nd Airborne is a symbol of liberty. And as you can see, I guess you are 82nd Airborne Paratroopers are very welcome at Sainte-Mère-Église. So, you know, here you have German troops for 4 years. And so it's very difficult for the civilians to sometimes to share their house with German troops. They have to give foods to them and so on and so on. So when you live under this, the rules of the German troops, it's very difficult. So when the paratroopers arrived, of course, it was freedom again. So there is a special links between the paratroopers, of course, 101st and 82nd Airborne, because of this story.
Henry Jean Renaud was 10 on D-Day. He is the older son of the D-Day mayor of Sainte-Mère-Église. We've heard from his younger brother, Maurice Renaud, and now we get his memories, get Henry Jean Renaud's memories.
On 5th of June, I get to sleep at maybe 10, and after my father came and he wake us, and he say, I must go to see a house behind the church which was burning, and he say, you must stay here in the special corner of the house, which was stronger, far from the windows, far from the door. And he said, stay here, I will come back. And he left, and maybe half an hour after, we heard a big noise. It was all the C-47 flying in the sky, and we heard also the German artillery shooting on the aircraft and the machine gun of the church shooting on them. And with my brother, we tried often to get to the window to see what happened outside. But my mother say, no, stay with us, don't do that, come here and pray. And maybe 1 hour after my father came back at home, and he was very excited, and he said the beginning of the invasion. And as it was maybe 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, I get to sleep. And early in the morning, maybe at 5 or 6 in the morning, he wake us again, and we were looking from the window. We have seen soldiers walking on the trees, and we don't know if they were German, English, or American. And when the light came, my father said, oh, no, they are American, because he recognized the helmet. But it was, in the morning of June 6, it was very quiet, because during the night, the German left Sainte-Mère-Église, maybe at 3 o'clock in the morning, and they left Sainte-Mère-Église probably to go where was their captain, and to prepare the counterattack for the next day. So in the morning, you have no battle, no shooting, and the airborne soldiers were walking on the square, some going to the west, some others to the south, some others to the north, and the civilian understand nothing at all. Why they are walking like that in all direction? It's because the paratroopers who don't land at the right place try to reach their drop zone. And my father said, I must go to see the house which burned during the night, and we say, Dad, we want to go with you. The house is exactly here, where is the boutique of the museum. When I arrived here, I have seen several paratroopers killed. Two were hanging in the trees, and was in this big tree, and his feet was at 1 meter from the soil, and as I was 10 years old, his boots was right at the level of my nose. And I touched the boot and he swung, and a soldier was here, they tell me, don't do that, get out, boy. And another one was right here where is this tree, and he was killed. Probably, I think that it was when he landed, the Germans were here, ran and shot him. When you are young, you don't realize what happened. And so my father say, don't be quiet, I am here, I am your father, I was a veteran from the World War I, nothing will happen. And I think that it was right. I have never been afraid, only one time, because we left a shelter to go another place, and when we arrived there, shell explode very close from us, and we have a lot of dust everywhere, and I can see nothing, and I smell the powder of the explosion, and I cried because it was not possible to see my father. And when the dust got down, my father was here, and he take my hand and he say, everything is okay, I am here. My father was a mayor, but he was also the pharmacist of the town, and the pharmacy is right on the side of the square, very close from the church. As a mayor, you have to take care of the civilian, because many of them had been killed, many of them had their house destroyed, and he have to take care to the civilian, but also help the American soldiers to give information, because he was speaking pretty good English, and my mother also. And in this time, you had not many people speaking English in this area, so he helped. Because we were in a shelter, and as we heard nothing, no noise, we need to go out to see the light of the day and to breathe. And when we were there, two paratroopers were here, one from the 82nd Airborne, and the woman here gave a drink to this guy, and he looked very happy. And I met him maybe 20 years after when he came.
June 1944, an Allied force made up of American paratroopers from the 82nd Airborne and the 101st, they would jump into the dark of night behind the German lines. Some would miss the drop zone. One would even land on the roof of a small village church in Sainte-Mère-Église.
That voice is our 82nd Airborne Division chaplain, Colonel Randy Griffin. He's speaking at a ceremony inside the Sainte-Mère-Église chapel. That's the famous chapel depicted in The Longest Day where John Steele was hung up on the spire. So let's listen into Colonel Randy Griffin.
That night, that operation, that paratrooper, that church, and that small village never envisioned that history was being made for future generations. So today, 73 years later, this church serves as a monument, as a reminder of a great victory that God provided. That night marked the beginning of the end for a wicked tyrant named Hitler, and a system of evil known as Nazism that was bent on dominating the entire European continent. In a world today that is very divisive, it's good to recognize and to witness those symbols and those monuments that bring unity. This church, this community is certainly one of those monuments. The unity between this place and certainly the paratroopers of the 82nd Airborne Division is as strong today as it was 73 years ago, when thousands of American paratroopers and soldiers would risk their lives, and many would pay the ultimate sacrifice to liberate this country and these people who had lost their freedom and their liberty to a dictator.
So one of our deputy commanding generals, General McFarland, gave a speech in the town square here in Sainte-Mère-Église.
We see the citizens and leaders of Sainte-Mère-Église. We see the forces of several allied nations, and we see military service members, young and old. Our paratroopers had never met the people of this town, yet together they both risked everything together when that first paratrooper landed here on June 6, 1944. All around this town, we see the strong ties of our memories of that defining moment. That bind is permanent, and today I'm confident those ties will bind us forever. Those bonds started here, and so did something else. The defeat of tyranny, the establishment of a new world order that honors freedom and liberty everywhere, an unbreakable bond between nations. In English, Sainte-Mère-Église translates to Holy Mother Church, and for the 82nd Airborne Division and other soldiers who have fought here, this place is sanctuary. This is where savagery died, this is where liberation was born, and this is where the war's first finishing blow began. This is the first town freed on D-Day. It was the first place that an American flag was flown. Today, 73 years later, the world turns its eyes to this small French town that flew that American flag. As evidenced by recent events in Manchester, in Iraq, and even yesterday morning in Kabul, evil still exists in the world. I'd like to offer our condolences to all those nations, especially the Germans whose embassy was affected significantly by the blast yesterday in Kabul. But we'd like to offer condolences to all those affected who had wounded or even worse, killed yesterday morning. That evil must still be defeated. It must be defeated by men and women willing to step out in the darkness of the night with the weight of the world upon their shoulders. That is why Sainte-Mère-Église is still so important. Our paratroopers had never met the people of this town, yet they risked everything when that first paratrooper stepped out into the darkness. This place was merely a point on the map for our paratroopers on the night of June 5th, 1944. It was a piece of geography for which they would risk their lives. They boarded the aircraft knowing more than half of the paratroopers would not return from the battle, knowing that if they did not succeed here, evil and tyranny may reign for years longer. 73 years later, the world turns its eyes on Sainte-Mère-Église. The world looks here for calm in the storm of dangerous, confusing world. The world looks here for an example of the love that conquers hate. The world looks here to honor this place and its monument. And that is exactly what we'll do today. We'll honor Sainte-Mère-Église for its people and for the memory of all those that fought here during that day and the days beyond 73 years ago and what it brought to Europe and all the Allies. Today we honor them and their accomplishments, not only for Sainte-Mère-Église, but for the whole world and for humanity. Merci beaucoup.
We are now getting ready to head over to the Stop Bar, a very well-known bar in Sainte-Mère-Église. There, we will speak with Colonel Retired Keith Nightingale. Colonel Nightingale has been on this show before. He is very well known here in Sainte-Mère-Église. He comes here every year. He comes here all the time. And when he commanded the 505th Parachute Infantry Regiment in 1984, the 40th anniversary of D-Day, he brought Generals Gavin and Ridgway here. They'd both obviously long been retired, but he brought them here to do a tour of some of the battlefields and speak with the 505th Paratroopers. So we want to talk to him about that and just get his perspective here. He really lives the history, Colonel Nightingale. He does tours of the Lafayette Causeway. He does tours of the beaches. So he is very engrossed in it, and he's considered an expert here in this area. So let's go talk to Colonel Nightingale. So where are we? Where is this? This is because I've heard about this place.
This is the Stop Bar. The term bar has a different connotation in France than it does in the U.S. This is where you get your coffee in the morning, your baguette, whatever it is you're going to have. The women, the kids, the dogs all come in here.
Let me just ask you, how old was Gavin in '84, roughly, when you started this sort of endeavor of talking to him about this?
General Gavin was a very strong personality, but you could see why he was a very good commander. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, age had clearly taken its toll. Yeah. He had begun to be in the early to late early stages of Parkinson's. We were sitting in the at this dinner we were at, and I sat next to him because General Trobaugh was off at a ceremony. And I told him, we're doing Lafayette Bridge tomorrow, and it'd be great if you could come and talk to the troops. Yeah. And he said, well, I got this problem. I got to be at Omaha Beach to talk to Walter Cronkite about the war. Don't know if I can make it. If you can figure out how to get me from here to Omaha Beach in time, then I'll be happy to make it. And happy to make it is like 7 o'clock in the morning. It was real rainy, drizzly. Guys were in some of them were in their rain gear. Everybody, of course, had on their berets and their fatigue uniforms, and they were rayed up about where the Iron Mike is. Big Mercedes rolls in, and it's obviously General Gavin. Hugo gets out, opens up the door, and I see General Gavin, and he's kind of stooped over. And I'm thinking to myself, I just made an incredible mistake. I've asked a guy that's, really hurting. He's advanced in age. I'm liable to embarrass him and embarrass the troops, and I was about ready to commit suicide at that point. General Hugo opens up the door, and the general puts on his beret, red beret with 3 stars on it, and he's kind of stooped over and he looks up and he sees 350 of the active duty airborne soldiers that were there at Iron Mike. And he just looks up, gets out of the car, takes his walking stick. Every illness and problem went away, and for an hour and a half, He was the commanding officer at Lafayette Bridge. I mean, it was incredible. He lost 40 years in that moment looking at those troops. He walked up in front of us, told us to sit down, and talked.
Yeah.
He talked for roughly an hour about the actions that were here. And then he said, "Follow me." We did. We got up, went down to the road, and then he walked us along the causeway, taking us all the way to the end, talking about what the issues were along the causeway on the 9th of June. Got all the way to the end and brought us up to a little road intersection past the church that's there, Coquini Church. And he said, this was the costliest piece of ground the 82nd Airborne Division ever had to fight for. I'm telling you right now, as the active duty airborne soldiers, the country absolutely depends upon you. You must do the job as these people did the job 40 years ago. It was an incredible experience. You could see the emotion in the man, and the troops were just flabbergasted. I mean, they were floored because they walked down that causeway and they saw what the troops had to deal with. This was the 325 that made the initial assault, followed by elements of the 07. And, you know, it was an absolutely mesmerizing experience. You see the board there to your rear. That's got pictures of his with us on that day at Lafayette Bridge.
You know, in many ways, to the world, Gavin is the 82nd Airborne Division. And he obviously means a lot to you. He's meant a lot to you in an interpersonal way, this kind of relationship you developed, and also his story. And I think, you know, Gavin commanded a time when it was sort of like D-Day. We understand D-Day, and that's why we love it so much. That's why we appreciate it, because it's clear. You know, this one wore a certain uniform, we wore a different uniform. It was clear, you know, standards, discipline. We were this kind of people, they were that kind. You know, as you talk to, as I'm doing this project and talking to people from the 80s, the 90s, the 70s, what do you think? There's a sense that maybe we've lost something in the 82nd Airborne Division. What do you think, Gavin? How do you think Gavin would reflect on the division as it exists today?
Well, the division and the nature of combat is totally different than when Gavin had it. It was real simple in those days. You attacked a piece of ground, you killed the bad guys, you raised your flag, you won. And that was the issue. Victory. Okay, what is victory? Victory is real clear. The German army is dead. We're not. We won. We're in Berlin. We're in charge.
Right. I tell people that, like, victory was sort of a math problem. I mean, you could understand, you know, the calculus. You could understand going in, and you could understand when it was over. And that's not necessarily the case with modern combat.
I think his concern, and I know because he talked a great deal about it in their pre-training before Normandy and all that. His greatest emphasis was on small unit training, small unit tactics, squad, platoon, company, and unit cohesion. He spent a lot of time, both he and General Ridgway spent a lot of time figuring out how to make units tight, because they understood that in combat, you're not going to have your normal platoon, company, battalion, brigade structure that we are organized as. It's going to be fighting done in little bits and pieces and penny packets. You got to focus on that. If you get diverted from providing time for these units to get their act together, you're marginalizing your overall combat effectiveness. But the world has drastically changed. Understanding General Ridgway did not have a radio here in Normandy for more than 24 hours after he jumped. Consider battle space management with no communications whatsoever. As he told me, all he knew as the division commander, about 1 kilometer in that direction, was what he saw, what he thinks he heard, or what a messenger told him. That was his total command control capability. Now it's vastly different. that we can bring in technology, helicopters, drones, airplanes, spooky stuff, or, you name it, we can figure out how to focus it on a point on the earth. And, every platoon leader has got this. Right. That can give him great precision on what he's doing and how he's doing it. So,
well, you think about a commander today is almost overwhelmed with information coming in from all these different things you're talking about. Audio, visual, multiple platforms, up in the air, on the ground, in the horizon. So,
Though I guess the motto would be, the perfect is the enemy of the good.
Oh, yeah.
You can wait too long to get the best word and lose the moment that's presented.
Right, and so obviously, that there's a real reliance there, a real requirement to rely on this concept, reinforced over time, of little groups of paratroopers, that they were going to exercise discipline initiative, they were going to know what to do, or they were going to generally figure it out in small groups.
Absolutely, and that was certainly the principal object learned as a result of Normandy, the LGOP principle. We had troops dropped as far north as Cherbourg, 45 miles from here, and as far south as Omaha Beach. 3 PFCs from the 101st joined the 2nd Ranger Battalion at Pointe du Hoc, because that was where they were dropped. The same happened all over the place. And it wasn't, we're here and we're lost, so we're just going to quit. Every little group of people said, we're here, we're lost, but we're not going to get lost. We're going to go do something. And every one of those little groups picked themselves up, a lieutenant here, a captain there, a corporal over there, and began doing their thing. They killed every German they could find. They cut all the phone lines. They just basically raised havoc as they tried to coalesce themselves. And that's, I think, really the key. The World War II 82nd troops had a great sense of cohesion because they were the unique airborne persona and personality. The same exists today. There's only so many airborne people. Well, airborne carries with it a greater requirement to do the job right. You don't wait to be led, you lead if that's the situation. And the PFC and the corporal and the Spec 4 need to understand and appreciate that. In fact, you ought to demand it. What are you going to do? You got a problem. Don't wait for somebody to tell you. Go solve the problem. And, that's a unique mental mindset among the troops. I saw that in my unit in the 82nd. I tried to build on it. I saw it in the Rangers. The same idea. A PFC with initiative is a really deadly weapon. You just have to make sure that the guy understands it's expected as much as required.
Right. Well, always great talking to you, sir. And, particularly here in this moment for us, 100 years for the division, and, our legacy really, to the world at least, it comes back here. Obviously, we started in Georgia, and then we moved to Louisiana, but our legacy really starts here. This is at least in the minds of most people in the world. So we just appreciate your perspective and insight, and always great talking to you.
Well, we hope you can keep it up. Every year is a challenge because of competing priorities and requirements. Finances are always an issue, but the great reward that I get when I'm here is you take a whole bunch of troops from the 82nd, never been here before, all ranks. You come down here and you show them where their grandfathers were. And it's, wow, it's a whole new deal. It's not like reading the book. It's really a self-actualization exercise. They look at what their predecessors did 73 years ago, and I know in the back of their mind, if they're in a really tight spot in one of the sandboxes, they're going to think back for a moment and remember what happened at Lafayette Bridge, and they're saying, well, I got to do something now, and they'll go do it. And that's a huge reward. You can just see the the emotion and the fire in their eyes as they go down through here and for the first time see on the ground what their history was. It wasn't just something dry out of the books. It was something really meaningful, and they can see it in human terms, what took place here, and it really means a lot. I hope the division can keep coming back and doing it if for no other reason, just to continue that kind of spirit that was here in 1944, that is the Airborne.
Yeah, and that spirit and that legacy is really why we do this program and why we keep talking to you, sir. So,
thank you.
Thank you, sir. So today's June 3rd, and we're preparing to do an airborne operation tomorrow. We're going to do a jump into Sainte-Mère-Église with about 70 paratroopers from the 82nd Airborne Division, and then we're going to march over to the famous Iron Mike statue and have a ceremony in honor of our D-Day paratroopers. So everybody seems pretty excited. We're doing our pre-jump training right now, and tomorrow is the day that we're doing the airborne operation. We're jumping with our German allies, paratroopers from the German Army, and 73 years after D-Day, we're now allied with the Germans and jumping with them, and just showing how much the world has changed since that day. And it's going to be an exciting jump, beautiful weather, and we'll check in here with a couple of people. All right, so we're here with Sergeant Jean-Baptiste. What's your first name?
Jean Chardens.
Okay, one more time.
Jean Chardens.
Okay, or a native French speaker.
A native French speaker.
So you're doing a lot of the translation out here today, translating for some of the ceremonies, going back and forth with some of our distinguished visitors, some of our VIPs from the 82nd Airborne Division, and talking to some of the French officials.
That's correct, sir.
So what has that experience been like, and how have you been received here in Normandy?
Very enthusiastic, sir. And it's like a dream come true for me, because when I was growing up, I used to see those things on TV, and then now I'm live to experience that. It's a great honor, a great privilege.
So, it's interesting that this entire town looks like it's dedicated to the legacy of the 82nd. You see the patch everywhere. You see it on windows and flags and signs. What's it like for you as an all-American paratrooper coming here wearing that patch?
It validates what we do every day, sir, in terms of freedom, in the name of freedom, because the people have been very enthusiastic and very grateful. It's like having gratitude on steroid over here. And it really put a great spin on what we do, and to see people being so happy and validate what we do, it's really worthwhile.
And so, when did you leave Haiti?
I left Haiti in 1998, June 1998, 29th, and and then ever since I've been here. After 12 years, I decided to join the army after the earthquake occurred in Haiti, and I saw 82nd Paratroopers went down there to help Haitians, and I say I gotta join. That's what inspired me to join and then to serve, to take care of them too.
Somebody told me that. I guess I didn't know that was you, but somebody had told me that story. That's so. Were you in Haiti at the time?
No, I was living in New York back then, and then after the earthquake occurred, 3 weeks later, I raised my right hand. I joined the service, and I've been honored ever since to just be part of that team, part of that lineage. It's an honor.
So that's another place where the AA patch stands for something and stands for our values, is Haiti.
That's correct, sir. Because when some people, when they hear about 82nd, they think, okay, hey, those paratroopers, they only invade, doing warrior stuff. But to see on the humanitarian level, to pitch in, to be so bold, and then the catastrophe in Haiti could have been way worse than that. Yeah. Had it not been for the 82nd Division to come in and then rescue people and then mitigate the whole thing, there would have been more than 500,000, and needless to say, all the cadavers on the streets after that could have caused a pandemic.
All the cadavers on the streets.
Exactly. So it validates, it elevates 82nd on a higher level, I should say.
Yeah. There's an incredible coincidence that we're on the same door and I happen to walk into you here.
That's right, sir. It happens.
It happens when you're in the 82nd Airborne Division, and good jump tomorrow. Good luck. Thanks for talking to us, and have a good jump tomorrow.
My pleasure, sir. Thank you very much.
All right, thanks, man. Thank you. All right, so it's jump day. We're out here on the airfield in Cherbourg, getting our T-11 parachutes on with our German partners here, and we're going to get on these C-130s, and we're going to jump. Everybody's pretty excited about it. After the jump, we're walking over to the Big Iron Mike statue there in Sainte-Mère-Église. There's going to be a lot of spectators that are going to be watching us land, a lot of the locals coming out, and then marching over to the Iron Mike statue, and we're going to have a ceremony there. So we're getting ready to board the aircraft here in Cherbourg and jump into Normandy. This is your first time doing it, Sergeant Linderman. What's this experience like for you?
It's an amazing experience. It's great to be out here. Got great weather out here today. Really excited to be able to have this opportunity to jump into Normandy. Yeah, it's going to be great.
And so you're also representing the division on the Color Guard, the winning team for the Color Guard during All-American Week. What's that been like, just representing the division in all these ceremonies?
It's been a very interesting life experience for me. We've been able to see a lot of different things that you wouldn't normally get to. We've been taken into a lot of different places, and we've been able to share with a lot of the French people's culture. It's been very nice to be able to experience it and be able to look at it from a different perspective.
And how have you been received by the people here in Sainte-Mère-Église?
Oh, the people of Sainte-Mère-Église have been amazing. They've been very warm and welcoming. They've really opened their hearts to us. You can tell that they mean it. They don't just put on a show. They're genuinely happy to see us, and they're genuinely happy that we're here. And you can feel it everywhere that you go.
All right. Thanks, Sergeant Linderman. Appreciate it.
Yep. Appreciate it.
All right. As you can probably hear, we're loading the aircraft now. We got time on target in about an hour and 10 minutes, so we're loading the aircraft, getting ready to do this jump. All right, just landed on the drop zone here in Normandy. Incredible experience. First of all, very soft landing here in Normandy. This is a field out here in Sainte-Mère-Église. Very tall grass. So it was a very soft landing. Incredible experience. Just packed up my parachute, and there's just a lot of. There must be like 700 people from the local community out here to observe this. So we're going to go talk to some of our paratroopers and talk to some people.
Specialist Cameron Barkley, he just landed on the drop zone, and he's turning his parachute in. He's a member of the Color Guard, representing the 82nd Airborne Division here in all these ceremonies, and let's see what he has to say.
Oh, it was great. It was a great experience. Got to jump the T9. It's the German parachute, much like our T10. Hard pull, hard landing, but it was good. Man, it's enough to break a tear. It's very heartwarming knowing what went on here and to be a part of it.
All right, here he is. This is Chaplain Colonel Griffin. We've heard him earlier in the show. Looks like he just landed. He's packing his stuff away. Let me go. Let's go run over here and put this microphone in his face here real quick.
This was the most awesome experience that I have probably participated in an airborne operation at any time ever. The spirit of the crowd here and just the commemoration of what this is really all about made this super, super special, and the jump was awesome. I had a great landing, so I'm good to go.
I came to Sainte-Mère-Église to find the heart of the All-American legacy, to explore the connection between memory, history, and reality. What I found is the meaning of D-Day and the role of the All-American Paratrooper within it. One of the reasons that D-Day resonates so profoundly 73 years on is that its meaning is so clear. The stakes for the world were so apparent. We know who is good and who is bad. We know the French were oppressed, yearning to be free. We understand all that. Our recent wars have been more ambiguous, stranger, more confusing, darker. Our enemies are not always identified by military uniform. The stakes are not always as clear. As we research this program and all the wars in which this division has participated, we're finding that each war has its own character. Each war has its own literature. Each war has its own truth. And every generation of all Americans have their own culture. The spine that connects all of us, that connects all of these cultures all the way back to 1917, is the AA patch, and the moments that it represented the values that we share with most of the rest of the world. The greatest such moment for the AA patch was in a small coastal town 73 years ago. We uphold and cherish that moment. We cling tight to its men and its meaning. We hope to live up to it always.